I think so. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Contemporary Issues Sunday School class. We are so pleased today to have Reverend Logan Robertson with us to talk about all he is doing with his unique ministry of downtown, the After Hours ministry serving the homeless, and also having meetings in bars every Monday night. And we'll ask Logan what he does with that when he does a religious service in a bar, what that entails. So before we do that, and before I introduce him a little more, Zoomers, welcome. Nice to have you here. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. On the lower left corner of your screen, hit your mute button. And we are recording this for future playback. And any other announcements, things going on? Picnic. Okay, what about picnic?
Well, we have an annual
Stand up, girl.
sorry. We have an annual picnic typically every August, around Labor Day.
Labor Day.
Okay. And Alice and Ron have graciously hosted at their home in the past, but are not gonna be able to do that this year. So we're looking at, the Coven, how do you say it? Coven Park, on September 13th. So that's, where we're kind of going with that. And we'll rent a, shelter house. And there's room for, I think, seats for 80, but we can also bring lawn chairs and stuff like that. So tentatively put that on your calendar. That's what we're gonna do. And we'll probably ask for maybe $1 donation from everybody to help pay for the cost of the rental. Yeah. So we'll be in touch about more, information coming up, but just so you're wondering when that's gonna be, we're looking at September 13th, okay?
Any other announcement? Yes, Helen.
And just a little bit late, and so I'm curious, is Trevor, Logan Robertson connected with the same after hours that,
Jerry.
Jerry
Yes,
Herships?
I'm going to describe that in just
My,
1 minute.
Facebook partner.
Yes, good question, Helen. We will tell that. Several connections to St. Andrew here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I will go, so we leave plenty of time. I'm gonna go ahead and just introduce Logan. Logan has served in churches and homeless providers since 2011. This is off of his website. He works for innovative approaches to housing on behalf of our friends on the street and against the criminalization of homelessness. He served as pastor of After Hours since 2021. Logan has a master's of divinity and theology from Vanderbilt. He and his wife Elizabeth live in Lakewood with their 3 kids, Nora, Liam, and Marcella, and their dog Rosie. After Hours has several St. Andrew connections. It was founded by Reverend Jerry Herships, who's formerly an associate pastor here at St. Andrew. Jerry also was originally a comedian and bartender and was drawn into ministry, thinking that their connections needed to be made in local bars and places churches don't usually go. So Jerry decided the church and the bar could learn from one another, and he started this ministry in 2009 as a way to reach out to people. And it also expanded from there to helping distribute sack lunches to homeless folks. And you all may know our Jim and Jim folks who are always seated each week by the sack lunches here and by our atrium. And Jim Francis is the volunteer coordinator for After Hours, and Jim McKeever is the treasurer. So they are heavily involved with this also. After Hours meets the first Monday of the month at Dawn's Tavern in Denver, and the second Monday at the Dive Inn in Denver, and then other places also. So with that, we just want to hear some stories about what you're doing with homeless, Logan, and about bars. But I'll let you start in, and then we'll jump in with questions. Can we interrupt you with questions at any time? Or would you like to just speak uninterrupted for a few minutes?
Maybe uninterrupted for a few minutes.
Okay.
I promise to leave time for questions.
Okay, sounds good.
Sure.
Well, thank you for having me here. I really need to update this picture. That's pre-COVID. There's a few fewer gray hairs there. Tom's Diner where this is taken, isn't even there anymore. I mean, the building's there, but Tom's Diner is closed, unfortunately. One of the great breakfast spots in Denver.
Colfax.
Oh, yeah, right there on Colfax and Pearl. So there's some of our leadership team. That's Jim McKeever. You might recognize him. Amanda, she's been around here at St. Andrew at times as well. There's Jim Francis. And yeah, we have a really, really strong leadership team at After Hours right now. I feel really grateful for for all the time and attention that they give to After Hours and to our folks who are living on the streets. After Hours meets in bars and restaurants around the city. We don't have a building. That's by design. It does create some headaches. Sometimes we get bumped from the different bars where we're going to meet, and we have to scramble to find other places to meet. But the boiler is also not going to explode in the basement. I don't have to worry about the roof collapsing during worship. And so it does mean we have to be kind of flexible, but it's a lot of fun. Our mission is to put more love into the world by providing necessities for people who need them, especially homeless folks, and by creating places where all are welcome. And so we do that in the bars and restaurants where we meet. We also do that when we go out on the street and distribute gear or lunches. And we also do that at a place called Network Coffee House, which I'll talk about in a little bit. The first thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that when we come together in the bars and the restaurants where we meet, the first thing that we do, our sort of call to worship, so to speak, is we make 100 lunches, right? Peanut butter and jelly stacked lunches. They're pretty simple. Peanut butter and jelly, chips, granola bar, some kind of fruit, maybe some other little candy or something like that. So it's very simple. It does meet a need of people who need something to eat. And then those lunches that we make on Monday are distributed the next day. We used to do that at Civic Center Park. Civic Center Park is now closed for construction. Before that, it was closed because they just want the grass to look really nice. And so they don't want too many people hanging out there. Of course, it was also closed during COVID. Pre-COVID, it was a place where a lot of people experiencing homelessness gathered, right? It's a public park. And so it was also a place where a lot of service provision happened from different groups because it was a place where you could come and you kind of knew that there was an install base there. And so After Hours served there for about 10 years. And then the other groups like St. Andrew and St. Luke's, other churches, law firms, advertising agencies, book clubs would make lunches and bring those down. And we had someone in the park doing at least 100 lunches every day, Sunday through Saturday, every day in the park for 10 years. And that was a place to meet people, to get to know folks, to also distribute the lunches, obviously, but more than that, just to communicate love to people that don't always experience that on the street. But that mission field, so to speak, has been taken away from us by the city, essentially. And so we had to kind of find new partners. And so the one partner that we found that's been the most faithful and the most kind of easy to work with is the Denver Central Library. So now those lunches get taken down to the Denver Central Library and distributed by people who are part of the community resources team at the library. So the Central Library, because it's a public space, ends up serving and being one of the largest service providers in the city, right? And so they have a whole team there of social workers and peer navigators to interact with folks, to give people what they need, to help people navigate different resources in the city, to get connected to housing, all that kind of stuff. What they don't have is food, but people are coming in hungry, and particularly since Civic Center Park has been shut down, people have been coming in hungry. So right now, After Hours and some partners bring lunches into the library 4 days a week. So we bring 100 lunches. We could probably take more, but 100 is kind of the round number that we work with at After Hours, 100 lunches. And so we take lunches there, and then we also take lunches to Network Coffee House. And sometimes I have people ask me, what good is a lunch? What good is a lunch to somebody experiencing homelessness? Why aren't you trying to get people housed? Get them off the streets? And that's not a bad question. Right? The thing that solves homelessness is housing. That's what solves homelessness. That's the bottom line. A peanut butter and jelly sack lunch is not going to solve homelessness directly. And my story that I want to tell this morning about lunches is that would have been last maybe October, November. I was taking lunches into the library, and I was going to stay that day and help hand them out. So they have a little area where they let me sit and hand out my lunches. And I was going in that morning in a very bad mood, a really bad mood. Getting my kids out the door that morning was not easy. Anybody with kids kind of knows how that can be sometimes, especially when they're little. So I was mad about that. I was mad about the traffic. I was stuck behind an enormous pickup truck with a bumper sticker that I didn't agree with. All the way from my house to the library.
That is frustrating.
So this fucking guy. I was not happy about that. I was already in a bad mood. The big truck put me in an even worse mood. And I also had in my head, what is this? What am I even doing? Making these stupid lunches to the library. What good is it? I guess if I was a poet, maybe I would have written a psalm, shaking my fist at God like so many of the psalms are.
Yeah.
But I parked my car and took the lunches out of the back and hoofed them up to the library and sat down, and I'm handing out the lunches, still just pissed off. And when I sat down, I noticed that there was a woman, and of course, all kinds of folks use the library, right? People with a lot of money use the library, people with no money use the library, people all the way in between use the library. And there's a woman, and I see she's pretty well dressed. So I was like, well, she's not homeless, she's not going to want a lunch. That was my first thought. And I'm handing out lunches, and I kind of see her look over. She's like, what's your ministry called? And I was like, After Hours Denver. We bring lunches every week. She was like, oh, okay. Maybe 5 minutes go by, and again, she's like, what'd you say it was called again? I'm like, After Hours. And she said, can I have a lunch? And I was like, sure. So I gave her lunch. And then there was kind of a lull. And she came over and she said, did you all used to serve lunches across the street? Because we're right across the street from Civic Center Park at the library. I can literally look out the windows and see where we always used to give out those lunches. And she said, I thought I could tell the story. I've told the story a dozen times. I thought I could tell without getting emotional, but apparently I can't. She said, those lunches when I was homeless were everything.
Wow.
Those lunches meant everything. And I said, I appreciate you saying that because I didn't know what I was doing here today. I didn't know what I was doing here today, and I really had a lot of doubt about the lunches mattering at all. So we get to chatting, and I said, what's your name? And she says, well, my name is Destiny. And I was like, of course. That person's name is Destiny. My destiny to bring these lunches down to the library today is even as much as I didn't want to be there. So, that story has been on my mind now ever since. Um, Especially on the days where, I don't want to get out of bed, or the morning is hard, or, I don't really feel like showing up. Her saying that those lunches are everything means a lot to me. And I think what she means by that is when you're in a place of emergency, and really what homelessness is, especially chronic homelessness, but really any homelessness, is that a series of, not just one emergency, but a series of emergencies have fallen on your head all at once. You don't have enough money, you don't have a stable place to live, you don't have stable connections in your life, you don't have resources that you need, maybe your car broke down, maybe something that you needed for work got stolen or misplaced or broke, or you couldn't afford to keep buying that thing. Sometimes it's something as simple as like a uniform for work. I think it's crazy that these corporations make people buy their own uniforms. I mean, come on. I just heard somebody the other day talking at Kroger, or sorry, King Soopers. Saying, well, we all have to wear black now. It's the teller and the bagger. We have to wear these black shirts now. And they're gonna give us two, but then we have to buy the rest. What? So if you can't buy that, or you can't keep it clean, you're staying in a hotel or in somebody's basement, that's an emergency that you can't afford the shirt that you need or keep it clean so that you can work your job at King Soopers, which is not paying that great in the first place. It's not terrible, but it's not great. So anyway, it's a series of emergencies that fall on somebody's head. And now you're stuck in that emergency. So every day is an emergency. Not just every day, every hour is an emergency. Every minute is an emergency. And then somebody shows up with a lunch and says, hey, how you doing? You need a lunch? Do you have hope? What's your name? That is not going to save you from homelessness. But it might help you feel the sort of self-worth, the love, the dignity that you need to keep taking steps forward so that someday you're not homeless anymore, so that you feel worth something, so that you can have the sort of self-confidence to know that there's a better life on the other side of homelessness. And it also puts food in your belly so you have some energy to get something done. Right? So the lunches are everything. Thanks be to Destiny for that. The other thing that After Hours does, one of our big events during the year is called Christmas in the Park. St. Andrew is also a big part of that. Keith Winkle helps us get the sleeping bags down town every year. Boy, I love that guy. He drives me a little crazy, but we couldn't do without him. Yeah. Well, I guess we'd figure it out, but he makes it easier. And Christmas in the Park is an event at Veterans Memorial Park, which is right between the Capitol Building and Civic Center Park, between Lincoln and Broadway, between Colfax and 14th. And last year at Christmas, we had 475 people come and get the gear that they need to survive the winter. So sleeping bags, hats, gloves, scarves, luggage, duct tape, hand warmers, shoes, boots, clothes, jackets, etc. Anything you can kind of think of, we try to have there. And we work with about 10 to 12 partners who come down on Christmas Day and make that happen every year. And this last year, I guess I was in a mode where I was like, what am I doing and why am I doing it? Because, I could see Christmas in the Park on the horizon. And we were kind of gearing up for it. There was a lot of communication with different groups and keeping everything in line. So I asked a outreach worker, his name is Greg, and he recently just got laid off, unfortunately, but he had been an outreach worker at a street outreach worker at St. Francis Center for 30 years. 30 years, that's a long time to be an outreach worker. And he's this sort of like cool guy. He rides his bike everywhere. He's always done all of his street outreach on a bike. He's probably in his mid to late 50s, and he's just been bombing around town on a bike doing street outreach for homeless folks that whole time. And I was like, Greg, what do you think about this Christmas in the Park event? And I kind of had to explain it to him, describe it for him. He was like, oh, you're the Christmas in the Park people. I was like, yeah, that's After Hours. And he said, I work every Christmas, and I've worked every Christmas for 27 years. And every Christmas, I have people tell me that they're grateful that I'm working on Christmas Day. And they say that, Graydon said this, they say to me, the only people who care about me on Christmas are you and the Christmas in the Park people. So one outreach worker and 10 or 12 groups, St. Andrew, St. Luke's, some other Methodists, a couple of synagogues, After Hours, etc. Those are the people who care about me on Christmas. Now, there's other people out there who also care. But that's kind of what After Hours wants to be in the world. When we say put more love into the world, that's what we mean. We want to connect people who are housed and comfortable to people who are unhoused and uncomfortable, so that they know that there's love for them out there, so that they know that they are cared for by somebody, not just other human beings, but by God, right? That there's an unconditional extension of grace to those folks, which is where the suicidal empathy thing rankles for me. Because as a Methodist, as a Wesleyan, I believe that God is extending grace to us before we even know about it. Wesley called it prevenient grace, grace that goes before. And then he breaks it down into all these other kinds of grace, but really it's just one grace. And that grace is extended to us unconditionally before we ever know that we're in relationship with God. That God doesn't start a conversation with us angry. And if your argument is that extending that kind of grace puts you in a position where you might get harmed, then I guess I would point at the cross. And not our kind of clean Protestant cross which is empty, but a cross that has Christ on it. Some part of our call as Christians is to be crucified with Christ. So if we put ourselves in a position of having too much empathy for people and it harms us in some way, then we're in good company.
Well said.
That's how I see it.
Yeah.
One of the places that After Hours since January, I always want to say July. My whole life I've been saying July when I mean January. Really, truly since I was like in kindergarten. January, we started running a shift at Network Coffee House. Network Coffee House is a hospitality house for folks experiencing homelessness. And it's set up as kind of a living room atmosphere, coffee house atmosphere. Come in, grab a cup of coffee, juice, water, tea. Maybe you need a shower. But more than anything, just a place to sit and be and experience some welcome. Take a load off, be in community with your people, play some chess or cards, read a book, etc. So that's every Sunday morning from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. Ryan, did you want to say a couple words about your experience I mean, I'm kind of throwing this at you out of the blue, but
That's fine.
that would be cool. Just a couple minutes of kind of what that looked like to you.
Yeah, hi, everybody. My name is Ryan Williams. It's my wife, Courtney, and her daughter, Kieran. We've been to Network 3 or 4 times, a few times. a couple times. And it is, first of all, it is a place where the idea is to be welcoming, to have this oasis in the middle of what is a very rough existence, as Logan's described for a lot of people that come. And when we volunteered for the first time, the message that Jim and Jim wanted us to appreciate walking into this was, this is an experience designed to give people rest and dignity. And we want to create an experience for folks that many of us have every single day. Oh, I'm sure most of the people in the room will swing into a Starbucks, or they have that place that they call the third home. You know, you have your work, your home, and then some other place where you feel like you belong. And Network meets that need. It is a place where folks can come and just put their guard down for a second and have a place of safety and have a place of feeling that they belong, that they are cared for and loved. The lunches are distributed, and it's, you know, it's tempting, I think, sometimes to feel like, you know, well, I'm doing a favor for somebody here. Take this lunch that I went out of my way to make for you. And I feel like, you know, the effect on us has been when we are willing to just be present in the moment and make a connection with somebody, you don't see them as, you know, this archetype of some problem in society or something like that. They become a human being in that moment, and you connect. You ask somebody their name, you ask them how their day is going, and before you know it, you made a connection with somebody that you would never connect with in the course of your everyday life. And that's life-changing. And it goes, you know, there's this incremental process, I think, going from viewing a problem from a distance, seeing this as something that somebody needs to do something about. And when you have these experiences like Network, and you put yourself in the middle of that situation, God begins to do something in you, and it breaks down this, whatever preconceptions we have in our hearts of what the world looks like for different people. And we begin to see people that God loves, that he cares for, that he extends grace to. And it's vital. I mean, the importance that After Hours and something like Network plays in the community cannot be overstated. Not because it meets the need necessarily by handing out a lunch on a specific day, but because it is an instrument of God's love and grace to people who need it most and who don't experience on a regular basis, just because the circumstances of their life are not graceful or are not loving. And it's an amazing thing that God is doing through folks like Logan, and we're just so grateful for you and for everything you do. It's been amazing.
Thanks, Ryan. I promise we didn't talk. That's better than I could have said it. And Ryan, thank you. You did a great job, Ryan.
Articulate guy.
Yeah. You want to come preach at After Hours sometime? But yeah, I mean that's really it in a nutshell. So we've been running that shift since January. I almost said July again. Since January, I've been a shift director there for 13 years. And it's you know, a hugely meaningful part of my life, and I love to introduce people to it. So if you ever want to volunteer, the lunches that get made here at St. Andrew every week end up right there at Network, and are served the same day. So if you make a lunch here, if you stop after church, and sometimes the gyms, I think, go a little too fast, but if you can run out of church and get down there to make a lunch, that lunch that you make will serve somebody just an hour later.
Where is Network located?
It's at 14th and Pearl, which is just east of the Capitol building on 14th, maybe 4 blocks, 2, 3, 4 blocks. And it's been running for over 40 years now. There's some debate about exactly when everything started, but yeah, over 40 years. So.
Ryan, can I jump in with a question too? Where are the homeless folks living now? Now that Denver police have swept the camps, they're not the tent cities that there used to be, and they're dispersed. Where are they living?
Yeah, so the Johnston administration's big claim right now, as part of his campaign to have a second term as mayor, is that they've reduced visible homelessness I don't know how they're exactly, I mean, maybe it's just in the name, visible homeless, right? They certainly have disrupted camps. Many people have been placed into, buildings that the city now owns. The technical term is non-congregate shelter. So congregate shelter is like the Denver Rescue Mission shelter. Big room, maybe multiple floors, lots of beds, and people all together in a big room or in kind of like a warehouse. There's some big warehouses on the east side of Denver that house a lot of people overnight. But this non-congregate shelter model is meant to meet needs of folks who are not going to end up self-selecting to go into those congregate shelters because they feel unsafe there, they feel uncomfortable there, they feel the rules are too onerous, they have mental health and trauma issues that make it very difficult for them to live in congregate shelter. So these are folks who typically would take shelter outside on the street, and then people, because human beings are social creatures, come together, right, into camps. And the camps are unsightly. Oftentimes they are not the safest places. Sometimes they become places which become increasingly unhealthy because having people around without sanitation and a large group of people, even something more than like 20 people, right, it gets pretty messy pretty fast. And so I don't I try to be careful about my criticisms of people in elected positions because I think that they have an impossible task, which is balancing, right? So many opinions, needs, demands, desires of so many people. And I think it's impossible and thankless. And I think to run for office, you have to be, maybe there's something a little wrong with you. And so on one hand, right, Johnston is trying to meet needs of people who want to see the city in a certain way, and the people who are experiencing homelessness and all the advocates that come around on both sides of that divide or spectrum or whatever. And so what they've done is become very aggressive at breaking up camps, moving people into shelter if they want to, and then have said that they've decreased visible homelessness. And they have decreased visible homelessness, but what that means is not always that those people end up inside. They're certainly not in permanent housing. They're in these non-congregate shelters. The ones who choose not to go into the non-congregate shelters are then forced to be by themselves, right? So now they're out of their community and they're finding places to sleep, which are hidey holes, which are places down by the Platte, which are, in bushes, in roundabouts, under culverts, et cetera, et cetera. And they're still using drugs, right? Sometimes to get through the night, sometimes to get through the day, to get through the week, right? To get through the month. Except now they're doing that by themselves, which puts you in a dangerous position because there's nobody there to keep an eye on you. And so from a harm reduction standpoint, having people by themselves using those drugs, which they're going to use one way or the other, means that they're in a dangerous position. And so, and I will also say that when these camps get disrupted, oftentimes, right, we might imagine an approach where it's like, this camp needs to get cleaned up, so I need you to clean up all your stuff. And then put it somewhere or move it with you. And people end up losing, even if that happened in kind of a polite way, people would end up losing things that they need, whether it's gear that they use to survive or vital documents, IDs, birth certificates, right? Things like that, SNAP cards, etc. But often doesn't happen in a polite way. The city contracts with garbage disposal, with off-duty police and on-duty police who don't have like a friendly approach. And I don't blame them for not having a friendly approach. I don't always have a friendly approach at network, depending on the person. But what often ends up happening is people come in, everything gets thrown in the garbage, and then that person is forced to kind of start over. And so I think it's extremely disruptive to people who are truly doing their best to survive. And one way to understand this is, or to get a kind of better understanding of this, is kind of the other ministry thing that After Hours has taken on, which is what I call stations of homelessness. So at stations of homelessness, we gather at Network Coffee House, and then you're familiar with Stations of the Cross, kind of walks you through the experience of Jesus, not so that you have the experience of Jesus, but you're kind of walking along with Jesus. So Stations of Homelessness is similar. It's 10 stations that ask you to enter into an imaginative exercise. What might it be like to be in a position where I'm flying a sign? What might it be like where I suddenly have $20 in my pocket, and what might I do with it? Right? What might it be like to lose all of my stable attachments, so that when something bad happens to me, there's no one, literally no one, who I trust to reach out to. So that's Stations of Homelessness. It's a walk downtown. It takes about an hour, and it is that kind of invitation to see homelessness differently, so that the camps, although there's a reality to the way the camps are, but so that the camps maybe appear a little differently than they would otherwise. So we can see the care that people have for each other in those places, so that we can see those people the way that God sees them. Right? We put on the eyes of Christ. We think, how would Christ see these folks, these beloved children of God? Even with the real reality of the rough way that they're living. And I'm starting to think about that, and I'll shut up after this, but I'm starting to think about that as part of this new initiative by the Bishop of the Mountain Sky Conference, Kristen Stone King, as part of a spiritual geography. So one of the great resources that we have in the Mountain Sky Conference, which is Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Montana, and one church in Salmon, Idaho, is our beautiful geography, right? I just had a church come in, a youth group and some adults come in from Leawood, Kansas, and they did this Stations of Homelessness with me. And Leawood, Kansas, there's beautiful things in Kansas, but not as beautiful as the Rocky Mountains. So the spiritual geography initiative is a series of treks and ministries in national parks and some kind of hikes that people can go on, and it's all about investigating God and nature and our relationship to God, and what you might learn from being part of a trek, being in nature, right? There's also a spiritual geography to homelessness. There's a path that people walk every day when they're homeless. And so that Stations of Homelessness is kind of an experience of getting on a path and navigating the metaphorical geography of what it looks like to be homeless day to day in Denver. And so that's the other thing that we're up to, which has been fun. And I'm trying to get the conference to kind of like put us on the list, right, of spiritual geography. I don't know if it's exactly part of their vision, but I'm going to try to make it part of their vision. Yeah,
That's great.
Well, anyway, I'll open up to the question. Sorry for
We've
going.
got about 18 minutes left. I want to mention that Logan is appointed by the Methodist bishop. And so his ministry, his salary is paid by the conference.
Well, no, my salary's kind of, we're an independent church.
Okay.
After Hours is, so the same way that Reverend Mark is paid by St. Andrew, my salary is paid by After Hours.
Okay.
I'm appointed by the bishop, but
Okay.
like any church,
Does After Hours get funds from the conference?
No,
No, completely, on donation?
yeah, donations, yeah.
Okay, speaking of which, we are going to pass around a basket, during the remaining time. If you would like to donate, we
Thank you.
encourage you to, absolutely. Okay, thanks for clarifying that. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
It's good to know. Yeah, Susie, go ahead.
They give money for drugs. Do some of them, also do some of the homeless have little jobs and they can't like afford homes, do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's all they can live on because they have little menial jobs.
Yeah, about 60% of people experiencing homelessness do have work of some kind.
Okay, so then they can use some money for the drugs.
Yeah, there's also other ways to make money on the street, you know? Sometimes it might be dumpster diving, right? Finding things that you can pawn, things that you can trade. There's theft, right? I mean, that's an issue it's, all over. And you know, even less savory, ways of
I got a question.
getting resources. Yes.
Do you have any interactions with step 13?
Only a little, right?
It's a recovery program for people addicted to alcoholism.
Yeah, I've made referrals to step 13 in the past.
Okay.
They have you have to be in a pretty narrow kind of window. It's not that it's impossible. For someone who's experiencing real chronic homelessness over years, it's pretty hard to get through those kind of gates. But not impossible. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Do you want to run the kind of stack of
Very sure. Go ahead.
Understand, a certain amount of homeless have drug problems, certain amount have, through other issues like mental health issues, wind up on the street. And then you've got a certain amount that, life just didn't work out right at the moment. So can you give us an idea of what kind of percentages are we looking at? How much is this drugs? The drugs push them into this? Is it mental health? How do you wind up in the homeless position?
So for the folks who we're interacting with at a place like Network, for instance, I think it's really all of the above. 95% of the people who come through the doors at Network will have what are called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. An adverse childhood experience isn't, dad was mad sometimes and raised his voice. It's really terrible experiences. And I won't go into all the grisly details, but I think the things that come into your mind when I say terrible experiences are
26.
are the things that I
Abuse.
yeah, abuse and all kinds of abuse from the time people are really little. So and it's not some stranger. Sometimes it is a stranger, but more often than not, it's the person who's supposed to be the trusted adult in your life. One of maybe just one or two people who you're supposed to be able to trust. Take away your ability to trust anyone. And it puts you in a position where you're medicating that trauma. Okay. And then oftentimes it's either that or it starts with mental illness. And then people who have mental illness are more vulnerable because of their mental illness. So they get put in positions where adults and peers take advantage of that vulnerability. And it doubles down on the mental illness. And now you're medicating those mental illnesses by using substances. Nobody uses any substance for the negative effects, right? People don't have a drink of beer for the negative effects. But of course, we know it has negative effects. You don't have to be an alcoholic to get yourself in a position with a few too many beers where you have a negative consequence. So, it's a matrix, right, of problems that occur. And it doesn't just happen to folks who you don't know, it happens to people who you may be close to as well. So in 2024, my brother-in-law died. He was homeless in Rochester, Minnesota. He was an alcoholic from the time he was in high school. And he got himself to a place where he was in chronic homelessness. This is my wife's older brother, 3 years older than him. He grew up in the same house. He had the same parents. He had the same opportunities. He had the same economic opportunities, right? He had the opportunity to go to college. He was a star baseball player, incredible basketball player. He was a very well-resourced person. But when he was in elementary school, he was sexually abused by a student teacher. So he has post-traumatic stress from that he's medicating for the rest of his life. And then he dies when he's 45. Adverse childhood experiences. If you're in a room of folks who are chronically homeless, almost all of those people have adverse childhood experiences. And that being said, also sometimes people are just have a predilection to get addicted to drugs. Then you're addicted to drugs, now you end up on the street. And once you're on the street, you're going to be traumatized in countless ways. And it makes it very difficult to just pull yourself up by, the proverbial bootstraps. So
Let's take some more questions, and I want to offer our Zoomers also, if they would like to ask a question, raise your hand or just go right ahead for a minute. If not, we'll move on. Okay, Larry, go ahead.
Colorado Coalition for the Homeless and the city of Aurora have each taken over an old motel to provide home. Do any of the people that work with you end up getting into either of those facilities, and does it help?
Yeah, so some of those folks, sometimes it's hard to know, but in general, yes. I don't think we see a lot of folks who are spending their majority of their time in Aurora, downtown in Denver, which is typically kind of the place where I work in Cap Hill. But there are people who go back and forth. Right, that 15 bus line that goes up Colfax is very popular way for people to get back and forth from Aurora. And I think it truly can help to be in non-congregate shelter, especially those kind of places. They're not these huge shelter facilities. They're just smaller, and you can you have an opportunity to take a breath, to keep your stuff, to connect to caseworkers, and to get what you need to start making steps toward permanent housing. And so, yes, it does help.
How about the Denver Rescue Mission?
I think the rescue mission does good work in a lot of ways. I have theological convictions that make my approach to serving homeless folks different from the rescue missions. The rescue mission has a kind of ladder approach to serving people experiencing homelessness. So they say, if you can step up to this rung of the ladder, then we will allow you to step up to the next rung of the ladder. You can prove yourself and step up to the next rung of the ladder. That serves some people.
Well, Aurora does that with that hotel too. They have 3 levels.
Yeah, and so I don't think it's a bad thing to have people meet expectations, and I think that it can be helpful for folks. But I guess I'm working at the level of homelessness where there's an unconventional positive regard for you no matter what, which starts with that Wesleyan prevenient grace. And a place like the rescue mission is more evangelical, and it's going to say sort of like, prove it to me before I extend the kind of grace to you that you might deserve, or prove that you deserve it first, and then we can talk. And so It's not that they're not doing good work. I think they are. We just have different approaches. I also covet their budget, which is. Anyway.
Logan, you've been doing this for a while now. Is it the same? Are you seeing the same people year after year, month after month, or is it kind of a turnover? Do those people move on and get help and it's new people that have problems, or are we looking at ones that are just stuck for life because they had that trauma?
Yeah. I do see some of the same folks who I saw when I first started in Denver. And that being said, a lot of those folks have realized housing, like through all the supports that are out there. There's a lot of new folks though also, and the drugs are very different than they were 14 years ago. Fentanyl in particular is the one that is really deadly and ultra addictive in a way that regular old heroin is not. And so and the methamphetamine is worse too. It's a lot more synthetic. There's different chemicals that the cartels are using now, and it creates psychosis in ways that it didn't 10, 15 years ago. And it's all very, I would say everything is more acute than it was just a few years ago. Interesting.
Providers that are working with those that have drug and alcohol needs.
Well, so the big homeless service providers in town are the Rescue Mission, St. Francis Center, the Coalition for the Homeless, and the Salvation Army. And so they all have connections to addiction resources. The one that I think I've seen people have the most success with is called Fort Lyon. And that is run by the Coalition for the Homeless. And it's out on the plains, and people get completely out of this environment, which kind of supports their addiction, and can get clean and sober out there. And a lot of folks have come back and gotten into supported housing, and then gotten to a place where they're just in regular housing like anybody. And so, yeah.
Great. We've got about 5 minutes left. Jane has the next question, then I don't want to let you get away without just telling a little about the bar.
Yeah.
Service that you do. Do you do a sermon in there, and how does that go? And Vicky just said that we've raised about $500 today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so
A little bit.
That's amazing.
Thank you, everybody, for that. Jane, go ahead.
I have a question. I realize that Denver being the largest city here, that there are more homeless noted about and for. But what about the suburbs? We live 5 miles west of here, and on the golf course area in a townhome and apartment area, and with lots of trees and shrubs. And over the years, more than 10 years, 15, 20 years almost, there have been homeless people sheltering themselves in our homes and the areas close to us. So how do we deal with the suburbs as
Yeah.
well in Denver?
The other effect that the Johnson administration's aggressive stance against visible homelessness, the other effect that has is that people just say, well, I'm not going to be here anymore. I'm going to go somewhere else. And somewhere else is the suburbs, right? Denver's kind of landlocked, right? In a way that a place like Houston, Texas, which, boasts how great its response to homelessness has been. Well, they have unlimited land in Houston, Texas, in a way that the city of Denver doesn't. But the suburbs have land. And what often has happened is people get to the border of Denver, and this is not so much true with Aurora, because really Denver's really a twin city. Denver and Aurora are pretty similar populations. But Aurora does an all right job welcoming homeless folks and finding resources for them. But when people get to the border of Douglas County, Oftentimes they're turned around and sent right back. That's not an effective approach to homelessness, right? But it also kind of gives the like, it gives evidence to us that homelessness is not a municipal issue. Relying on the city of Denver to solve homelessness is never gonna work. And Douglas County can't solve homelessness on its own either. Aurora can't solve homelessness on its own either. It is at least a state issue. And I'm gonna show my cards here as my political bent, in that I believe it's a federal issue. I believe it's a federal issue. Did you have a question that's kind of in the realm here of what we're talking about? Or is it a change?
It's a quick question.
Sure.
Have you noticed a change in the demographics? Are you seeing more younger people, or older, or has that stayed pretty much the same?
I guess I've only seen more younger people because the old people are dying. And when I say old, the
45.
life expectancy is 45.
That's how old your brother.
That's how old my brother-in-law was. So nationally, I think it's more like 56, but here in Colorado, it's 45. So yeah, the demographics are changing. It's a federal issue. And I want to get to the housing issue because housing is what solves homelessness. The Burns Center, which is at the University of Denver, that studies homelessness, and they found that in order for the United States to quote unquote solve homelessness, every state on average would have to build 150,000 units of housing overnight. Why overnight? Because our political economy is always creating more homeless people. Because the cost of housing goes up by about 5% per year, and wages rise by about 2.5% per year. Well, how's that going to work over 10 years? Right? And then I'll come to my like big moonshot sort of way of thinking about this. It's a federal issue. We have to decide as a society, we are not going to have this many people experiencing homelessness every year. Well, how are we going to build 150,000 units of housing overnight just in Colorado? Without real imagination about what our shared life together should look like. And the example that I give is, have you all been to the Hoover Dam?
Sure.
So the Hoover Dam, and I sort of love the idea of the Hoover Dam because people always think about the New Deal, right? And like certain people on certain ways kind of rankle, the New Deal, it's not so much what it was cracked up to be, and I'm not that big a fan of FDR. Well, the Hoover Dam's not named after FDR, it's named after a Republican.
It used to be called Boulder Dam.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's what
No, I
it
didn't
used to
know that.
be.
Oh, that's
That's what it
interesting.
was when it started.
Anyway, it's named after a Republican, okay? The men who made that thing as part of the Civilian Conservation Corps, or what would become the Civilian Conservation Corps, they're just a bunch of high school graduates. And they became the foremost experts on pouring concrete in the world. In the world. Bunch of guys with high school diplomas did that. Closer to home, we have Red Rocks Amphitheater. That's a Civilian Conservation Corps project as well. The cabins that the men who built that place, the cabins that they lived in are still there. You can go visit them. So they also did a very good job building those cabins. Red Rocks wouldn't exist without the kind of imagination of like, what if there's a place for people to come and experience something like they can't experience anywhere else in the world? Now, those projects are very far in the past, right? Very far in the past. But the first time that I went to the Hoover Dam, I spent all my time looking at the dam. And then I turned around and they have built an interstate overpass over the Grand Canyon. And it's made out of concrete. It's made out of poured concrete. It looks like this thing is flying. And I stood there in awe, thinking like, I didn't know that we had the like stones to do this, right? To do this kind of thing. To imagine, it's not so great having everybody try to get to Arizona by driving over this 2-lane like highway on the dam. Let's get the interstate over this thing.
But we could do that with homelessness.
We can do that with homelessness. We could build the Hoover Dam, we could build Red Rocks Amphitheater, we can still build a bridge, which for all intents and purposes looks like God put it there. But of course, God didn't put it there, we did. We can do that with homelessness. This is like as patriotic as I get. That this country can do that kind of thing still.
We could if we had the will.
That's the spirit that we need. If we could stop the reality TV show of politics that we have.
Yeah.
Right, and then it didn't just start in 2016, it's been going on a long time. And kind of pull together and do something as a people. I still think the American people can have that kind of imagination. So that's how we solve homelessness, is by having a big hope for it.
We are out of time, but thank you, Logan.
Thank you all. Thank you for the time. Yeah. And thanks so much for supporting After Hours. That's how we keep going is donations like that. So, yeah.
We're so glad to have
Thank
you
you.
here. See you next week.
Wonderful.